Welcome back, America, to Sound Retirement Radio, where we bring you concepts, ideas, and strategies designed to help you achieve clarity, confidence, and freedom as you prepare for and transition through retirement. And now, here is your host, Jason Parker.
America, welcome back to another round of Sound Retirement Radio. You're listening to episode number 479. The title is Beyond the Birthday Gift, Smart Ways to Build Generational Wealth. In today's podcast, I invited Tim Tenbrink, CFP, back onto the show. Many of the people that we serve are not only interested in how to make the most of their retirement, but they're also in a position where they can think about how they can use their wealth to make a meaningful difference for the next generation. There are a number of different ways to give to children and grandchildren, and how you give can be just as important as how much you give. Tim and I have several ideas to share with you today that can help you think more strategically about giving and building generational wealth. I know you're going to love this conversation. As always, the transcript, along with articles, links, and resources will be available at soundretirementplanning.com. Just click on episode number 479. But before we get into today's show, let's start out by renewing our mind. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. For it is by grace that you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. And then something fun for your family. Why did the student eat his homework? Because his teacher said it was a piece of cake. What do you call cheese that's not yours? Nacho cheese. Nacho cheese. And without any further ado, here's my conversation with Tim Tenbrink. Tim, welcome back to Sound Retirement Radio.
Thanks, Jason. Good to be with you today.
I love this topic that we're talking about today, this idea of grandparents helping the next generation. And that could be their kids or grandkids. We'll do a future podcast where we talk more about giving to charity, but today we really want to focus on giving to the next generation directly and what are some of the strategies around doing that. And one of the reasons I think this comes up is because when we're doing financial planning for people, when we're doing retirement planning, we always like to say, let's hope for the best, plan for the worst. As a result, we end up with making really conservative assumptions about the growth rate of their assets and about inflation and their spending. And so a lot of times what ends up happening is every year when we're reviewing their plans together, the numbers are looking better and better, not worse and worse, because we make such conservative assumptions from the get-go. And then by the time people start getting into their 70s and 80s, they just realize that they're going to end up with a lot more money. They're not going to be able to spend all of the resources they have. And so they're really thinking about, well, how do we get the money to the next generation? What's the most efficient, effective way to do that? And in some instances, depending on the state you live in, you could end up with state estate tax or state inheritance tax. And if your state's big enough, you could also end up with federal estate taxes. So grandparents are saying, boy, if we can give these assets, get this money out of our estate, give it to our grandkids or our kids earlier, then they're accomplishing all types of different goals, from helping the next generation, potentially paying less money in taxes, and really blessing the people that are most important to them. Is there anything else that you found when having these conversations with people?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jason. There's a twofold approach that we're talking about. There's the practical from a financial planning standpoint, that some people are in a situation where we are thinking about future estate taxes. We are thinking how to reduce those, in which case lowering the overall assets in the estate. These are some of the vehicles that we can look at. But a lot of our clients, when we talk to them, things have gone well, and they're starting to think, okay, we've got plenty for our lifetime expenses. We don't want to wait until we die for this money to then maybe be a blessing to our grandkids, maybe even great grandkids. And so when we see them just starting out on their journey, they're thinking, maybe how can we get them on a good financial path? We've got means to do so. Instead of just waiting and leaving this money when we die, what can we do now? And I think that's the twofold conversation we typically are having with clients. And, that idea of, I think when we talk with our people, they'd say, I'd rather give with a warm hand than a cold hand.
I love
I'd
that.
like this. I'd like to see, the difference that this is going to make now by doing this gift, doing this transfer to help maybe pay for college, buy their first house, maybe buy their first car, and a multitude of reasons. But I'd rather step in and help them now than just leave the money when I die and don't even necessarily know what happens with it. So that's kind of why we want to be talking about some of these vehicles to help facilitate that mindset.
That's awesome. That's so good. Well, today we have 7 different ideas that we want to share with our listeners. And the first one are UTMA, UGMA accounts. So will you share with our listeners where these come into play and how people might be thinking about them?
Yeah, and I think, Jason, before we kind of even talk about the individual vehicles that we're going to discuss today, I kind of have a mantra that when we're talking about gifts and transfers from, one generation to the next, the best gift or transfer that you can make to a young person is the wisdom that allowed you to accumulate that wealth in the first place. So we're going to talk about very practical ways to do it, but I think we'd all agree that just giving somebody money without the wisdom that allowed you to gain that money, the best the best path you can put young people, whether it be grandparents with grandchildren, or even your parent or your children if they're younger, is just also with that gift saying, okay, here's how we came about achieving this wealth. Here's how we accumulated it. And when we think about stewardship, you've got an individual stewardship, but we want to pass that wise stewardship on to the next generation. So just keep that in mind. I think as we transfer wealth, we want to help them manage that in a way
Mm.
that's going to allow them to be wise, which is how you accumulated that wealth in the first place. So
One,
now,
wait, that's
go ahead.
awesome. I love that you said that. And the reality of it is how we see that come into play, at least how I've seen it come into play, is I see, well, my mentor, Dean, he did a ski trip with his family every year. And they were very intentional about spending time together, bringing the whole family together. They'd go up into the mountains and rent a cabin together and then go skiing and have fun. And of course, it was mostly having fun, but there was also some mentorship and some leadership and some wisdom being shared those evenings over the dinner table. I've also heard families take like a family cruise where they'll take the entire family on a cruise. And part of that time together is to share that wisdom. And so I think that's so good. What are some other ideas that you have for, should people be writing it down? Should they be recording short form videos to share with the next generation? I mean, somebody once said that your kids are going to learn a lot more by what you do than what you say. So obviously living this out is important, but do you have any other thoughts or ideas about that intentionality?
Yeah, well, I think conversation is the key piece there. You've got to, instead of just sending a check, you've got to talk about, okay, how can you train the next generation about money and how it works? And, if we're talking about some of these vehicles where you're able to provide an investment, talk about, okay, how to wisely invest that in a way. And, a lot of the vehicles we're talking about, require a custodian, and it's instead of just saying, okay, you're going to be hands off with the child, the beneficiary, how can you bring them along on that journey so that they can see the power of compounding, the power of how investments will work for you? And I have a good friend who is a grandpa that was telling me about a recent conversation with his grandchild who is working to save some money. He wants to buy a laptop, but they were talking about investing. He took them to McDonald's for lunch, and then they were talking about just different companies and how the stock market works and how you're investing in companies like McDonald's when you own their stock. And so, these companies that they can understand and are familiar with, it's how can I translate that into, hey, you're not just a consumer here, but you're an owner
Love that.
if you own stocks of these companies. Well, that's a whole new world in a sense for a young person to understand. And so just having those conversations are teachable moments that you're just having lunch, but then you can discuss that. And I've had that with my own kids, just thinking about, hey, what are these companies that you guys know and we use? Well, hey, if you've got some index funds and you've got some investments, you're actually a part owner in those companies, and that's how the economy works. And so just preparing them to be wise investors down the road by just talking about it.
Yeah. And implementing, getting them to think as owners. That is so critical to realize that when you're an investor, you're not gambling. You become an owner of a business, and that is such a great way to help the next generation understand. I love that, Tim. All right, so let's get into some of the different tools that are available to give. And of course, people just give cash directly to the kids and grandkids, and we have a lot of clients that do that. Usually November, December, they'll give the kids a chunk of money. And there's this year, 2026, the federal annual gift tax exclusion is $19,000 per person. So we have to keep that number in mind oftentimes when thinking about these different strategies. But let's dive into the different tools.
Yeah. So the first one we're going to chat about is either UTMA or UGMA. An UGMA or UGMA is the older version. UTMA is kind of the more modern version. Important piece to know there, the main difference between the two. In UGMA, you can only hold financial assets, and UTMA allows you to hold things like real estate, vehicles. So there's other tangible assets that can be included in UTMA. Primarily, what we're going to be discussing is the idea of holding, equities in those stocks and bonds, but it is available to transfer assets into an UTMA that would be non-financial assets. And the thing about an UTMA or an UGMA is really the flexibility. Why would someone want to open this type of account? You can think of it as a brokerage account for a minor in a sense. Minors can't open up their own brokerage account if they're under the age of 18. This allows them to get a start with a custodian who's going to oversee those investments, allow them to get some investments started at a younger age. And then when they, depending on your state, reach the age of determination, that then transitions into their own brokerage account. So it's allowing them to get a start at an earlier age, allowing that, like we said, that transfer to maybe take place. You can fund this with a cash gift. You can even transfer maybe stocks individually or funds to these accounts. So a lot of flexibility there. And that's what the main idea of an UTMA and an UGMA gives you is flexibility.
Now,
Go ahead.
oh, I was just
Go
going to
ahead.
say, so on the UTMA, on the UGMA, you used a word there, age of determination. And so for our listeners, that means the money becomes the child's at a specific point in time. And that's usually somewhere between 18, 21, or 25, depending on the tool that you're using and the state that you live in. So,
Exactly.
so soon as a grandbaby's born, you might say, hey, look, let's start putting money into this UTMA, this Unified Transfer to Minors Act
Understand.
account, so that when they maybe turn 18 or 21 or 25, they're going to have this pot of money that's been compounding and growing for them. Not necessarily for your education. It could be used for education, but it can it's just their money to use for whatever at that point.
Exactly. It can be used for all kinds of things. This could be something to help them for a down payment on a home, maybe a startup capital for a business, multitude of things that could be funded through kind of this vehicle being allowed to appreciate and grow so that when they reach that age of determination, it varies by state. In Washington State, where our office is, it's 21. At age 21, then that account becomes fully theirs, is retitled to be a brokerage account in their name. But until that time, that's where owner is the child, is the minor, the custodian or who's overseeing that is then going to be whether it be grandparent, parent, whoever establishes the account, they're going to be controlling the investment decisions and distributions, things like that that would come out of the account.
And that's where also the $19,000 federal annual gift tax exclusion often comes into play, or when people talk about it, because if you give more than $19,000 to any one person, then you have to file a gift tax return. So if your gifts are less than $19,000, you don't have to worry about filing a gift tax return. The kid doesn't have to file a gift tax return. It's just a way to get money. And I think a key here, this is especially important for people who have higher estates, because they're saying a higher net worth, because they're saying, look, I'm not going to use all this money. I can get some of the money out of my estate now, start funding the money for the grandkids. It becomes theirs at a predetermined age. And it's just a very simple structure without having to get very complex trusts involved. Very simple way to start saving money for the next generation.
Exactly. From a completed transfer standpoint, you can contribute that 19,000. If you're a couple, you can double that as a joint gift, 38,000. You can give that annually to each individual. And so, that allows you to have that completed transfer. You've immediately reduced the value of your estate by that transfer that you've made to that UTMA account. And then it has the ability to grow. I mean, and here's the advantage too, if you're thinking long term. Let's say you have a grandchild that's born in their 1 year of age and you already have a high value estate. You've transferred maybe that 38,000 as a couple at age one. Well, if you held that money in your estate for 18 years, now it's grown. Now your estate's just gotten bigger. And so, just these are some more complex estate issues, but by giving that gift and maximizing that annual gift, you've allowed that funds to be transferred out of your estate. Then it can grow for that minor who doesn't have an estate issue to begin with. and just a very practical way to do that.
Yeah, and I think the other side of this too, some people hear $19,000 or 38,000 and that intimidates them. And it doesn't have to be that much. I mean, it can
Yeah,
be a very small, $100, $500, $1,000,
yeah,
whatever fits into your budget, whatever fits into your spending plan. It's just a way to say, hey, look, this next generation is really important. We want to start getting some money set aside for them. Here's an effective way to do it without getting a bunch of attorneys involved in setting up expensive trusts.
exactly. Instead of saying, okay, here's some cash, do with it as you see fit, it's okay, I'm going to give you this gift, but I'm going to help you structure this in a way that's going to be better for your long-term future than just giving it to you to put in your savings account or checking account to spend on whatever you want. So trying to help them get on that path of building wealth at a young age versus just giving them cash to spend on whatever they might see fit.
Yeah. One of the things I love about this personally, this idea of setting up a specific account for a specific person for a specific purpose. I have an account like this for my daughter where every month my wife and I, we contribute money to it, and it's for my daughter's future wedding for her and her future husband. So it gives me a reminder to pray for that future husband, to be intentional about saying, hey, there's a guy that the Lord has picked out for my daughter, and I just want to be preparing for this wedding in the future, and I want to be, just praying for this individual that's going to be joining our family at some future point. Now, we don't do that through the UTMA tool. We just have a regular brokerage account set up for this, but just that intentionality of knowing that there's a specific person that this money's tied to, it really changes the way that you think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what do we want to talk about next?
Yeah, I think we can talk next about a 529 plan, and people are probably familiar with these. Primary focus of a 529 plan is to fund education. I mean, this is going to allow you to take tax-free distributions from a 529 for qualified educational expenses. And so maybe there's some grandparents out there just had a grandchild born and they're thinking, okay, we've got the assets. We want to set this child up so that when they get college age, that college is going to be fully funded. And so, two ways that you can do that is you can wait until they're in college, and maybe now you've got a child that's in college and you want to help. You can give directly as a gift to that university. When we talk about the $19,000 annual limit, that goes away if you give money directly to an institution. So if they're in a university, you can pay for their tuition directly, and then that can exceed that $19,000 a year limit.
Hmm.
But let's say you've got younger grandchildren that you're thinking, okay, I'm thinking long term rather than wait until they're in college. I want to get funding started now that money can grow tax free to use for that purpose. And so that's where the 529 plan comes in. And a lot of different areas fall under the umbrella of that because 529s can fund obviously tuition and fees that are associated with technical fees, all of those things that be associated with taking classes, but then also room and board, books, supplies, technology, laptops that they need for doing their coursework. All of that can be funded from a 529 plan. So you're kind of setting them up. We all know college is expensive
Yeah.
nowadays, and how to fund college is a big question that young people are having as they're approaching that age. And so here's something where grandparents can be a blessing and set them up and say, hey, we've set this up for you, we want to make sure that you can get an education, and rather than having thousands of dollars of student debt that you're finishing with, we're thinking ahead so that you can have that opportunity without having to get yourself in heavy debt at the beginning of your adulthood, that type of thing. So 529 plan is a great way to do that.
And one of the things we like to do is to project out into the future what we think. We look at what the current cost of tuition is, then we can project out into the future and say, okay, with inflation, here's the future cost of that education. Let's say they want a 4-year education and the parents want to pay for all of it. Then we can say, well, we just back into that number and say, if you want to pay for all of the college education, here's the dollar amount that you're going to need to set aside every month until they're 18 and they're heading off to school. Or a lot of parents say, I want to help them, but I want them to have some skin in the game. So maybe we'll pay for 2 years of school, and then the kids have to figure out how to pay for the other 2 years, because people tend to value things more when they're participating in the costs associated with it.
Yeah, as financial planners, under that umbrella of education planning, that's where, doing a needs analysis and saying, okay, what's the goal? Instead of waiting until, maybe your teenager, I know you've got a couple kids, you've got a son in college and another one to get about ready to go to college. Instead of waiting until they're 16 and saying, oh no, how are we going to pay for college? We can start early so that way you can systematically be going in that direction to say, what's the need going to be? How do we achieve that goal? And then that's just a matter of, okay, it's going to take monthly, annual contributions to these accounts so that we can achieve that goal when they're ready for college.
Yeah, you're right, Tim. I do have one that's almost done with college now, and another one that's just about to start in just a few days. We're going to be taking her off to college. And we did set up 529 plans for both of our kids when they were born. And I have to tell you, it is so nice to know that there's just this pot of money that's set aside for this specific purpose. And it creates no financial stress for my wife and I because we've already done the planning in advance. And
Yeah.
one of the things I love about the 529 plan that we used, and I don't want to promote any specific company here, but we told the grandparents, we said, look, our kids, we live in a world of abundance right now. Our kids really, they have so much. And more toys at Christmas or birthdays is just overwhelming. I mean, sometimes you go to the birthday parties and there's just so many gifts. And of course, it's fun to give the kids something fun that they really enjoy and they can play with. But I would always encourage my parents to say, hey, maybe get them something small for their birthday or Christmas, but make the bulk of your giving to the kids into their 529 plan. And the company that we use, they actually track who made gifts so that the kids, as they head off to school, they can see, grandma and grandpa contributed this much, mom and dad contributed this much. And it's just a cool way to help the kids know that the family was involved in funding their education. We believe education is important and we want them to have the best in life. And we think that one of the things that people never take away from you is your education. You can lose your job, you can lose your business, you can lose your wealth, but they can never take away your education. And so we invest in that into the next generation.
Yeah, that's really good, Jason. One of the very practical things, conversations we have with clients that are looking to set up 529 plans is the decision about, does the grandparent, if that's, in our case with many of our clients, they are grandparents that they're thinking, okay, we want to set this up for a grandchild. Conversing with them about, okay, do you want to be the owner of this account? When we look at a 529 plan, you've got an owner and you've got a beneficiary. Beneficiary would be the future student, the minor currently that's looking at future college expense. The owner then has the responsibility for investment decisions, future distribution. Just because a minor is a beneficiary doesn't mean they're going to be able to just take withdrawals at will from this account. You're then in charge of those decisions. And so we do have some clients that would say, okay, maybe my child, their parent has already got a 529, and like you mentioned, they're going to make contributions to that. Certainly can do that. Or maybe there's not a 529 plan and the grandparent saying, I'm going to start this, I'm going to be the owner of it. And we give wisdom or advice in terms of, okay, here's some investment options, what's the time horizon, let's help you get that invested in a way that makes sense of when these funds are going to be distributed. But practically speaking, that's a decision that we work through with clients is, okay, do you want to be the owner, or are we just going to move these assets and have maybe their parent be the owner?
Yeah.
And setting that account up.
For my wife and I, that's what we did. We were the owners of the accounts. Our kids are the beneficiaries. One of the nice things about setting it up that way too is as long as it's a family member is the current beneficiary, you can change beneficiaries in the future. Yep. So if you oversave in the 529 plan and you have two kids, you could change the beneficiary to the second child, or maybe even to future grandchildren if your own children don't end up using all the 529 money. So it creates a lot of flexibility, but the key is knowing that investing in their education is important, and it's something that a lot of grandparents want to do. And
Yep.
A 529 plan is a really great tool because I don't know if you touched on this, but it's money that grows tax deferred, and as long as it comes out of the account, it's going to be tax free as long as it's used for qualified education.
Exactly. As long as it meets one of those criteria for being a qualified education expense, a child at age 1, maybe you fund $5,000 into that 529 plan. By the time they're in college, maybe that's grown to $20,000. That $19,000 of appreciation, as long as it's used for those education expenses, is tax free. And so a great opportunity there to just see appreciation and maximize those dollars that can be used for that expense of education.
Now, of course, there can be, depending on the state you live in, some benefits from a tax standpoint, state income tax standpoint. The other thing that I think is pretty cool is that special 529 rule that allows you to front load 5 years of annual exclusions. So $95,000 per donor for a married couple, $190,000. So for higher net worth grandparents or parents, they may want to put a bunch of money into that 529 plan just to get kickstart it right from the get-go.
Exactly. Especially those who, like we said, maybe have a higher estate that are looking to reduce that. That can be a great opportunity to super fund the account from the get-go, and then and really have an opportunity to see those funds again grow over the childhood of the future student that's going to be utilizing these funds.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
so oh yeah.
before we move on from 529 plans, I do think we got to talk about this really cool provision that's part of the Secure Act 2.0. And that is what they recently approved is now you can actually roll funds over from a 529 plan to a Roth IRA, which is a really cool provision. Let's say you funded a 529 plan and the beneficiary, they're not going to use all of those funds for college, or maybe they decide not to go to college. Well, there's this new provision in the Secure 2.0 Act that says a lifetime amount of 35,000 can be rolled over from that 529 plan to a Roth IRA. And so that's really neat because not only have you got that tax-free growth, now it can be transitioned to a Roth account and get them started in an account that can grow tax-free for the rest of their life. And so that lifetime limit of 35,000, the time that this would matter is once that beneficiary is starting to get some earned income. It's going to have to be done in chunks as they have earned income. There's that annual limit that is going to be the Roth contribution limit. That's what you're restricted to be able to roll over on an annual basis. But in a matter of maybe their first 5 years of working, you can maximize that lifetime limit. So really cool provision that's available now with those 529 plans.
Yeah, you're right. That it just makes it so much more flexible. If you oversave in the 529, of course, changing beneficiary to another family member could be one strategy. But when the kids enter the workforce, you want to help them start saving for retirement. They've still got money left over in the 529. Now we're using the 529 money to fund the Roth IRA for a couple of years until we get to that 35,000. That's an awesome new rule that just makes the 529 that much more powerful. We love Roth IRAs. I know I don't think we're going to be talking about Roth conversions necessarily today, but we are going to be talking about some Roth accounts. Are you ready to switch to the next account type?
Yeah, absolutely. So that takes us to the next account type, which would be a custodial Roth IRA. And the main difference with the custodial Roth IRA versus a regular Roth IRA is just this is for a minor. So you can't be the owner of a Roth IRA until you turn 18. But a minor can open with a custodial parent or custodial grandparent. It's not limited to a parent necessarily. This custodial Roth IRA. And you've talked on the podcast. Many of our clients would know the power of a Roth. That money once invested in there can grow tax free, as long as it's held to that 59 and a half, or for qualified distributions can come out tax free. And so that is just a really powerful tool. And so the custodial Roth allows, maybe a minor that's just starting out work to get started investing, starting to save for retirement in a way that's going to be very tax efficient. I've been having this conversation. My oldest is just turned 16. He's going to be starting a job. And we've talked about, okay, how do you get a start investing? I've got some accounts that have a little bit in there for them that I would be looking at, but this is his money. He's looking, okay, where do I start becoming an investor? And so right away, I've talked to him about, we can open up a Roth IRA for you. And one thing that I am excited about to just encourage him is the idea of maybe doing a match. This isn't required, but something that maybe a grandparent can look at is say, okay, you've got a job now. How about we open up this Roth IRA? If you put $500 in this, how about I'll match that $500 and get it in this
Love
account?
that.
Just helping them get in started in investing. I was thinking about it as I was making a budget with my son, who he said, okay, I think if I work this many hours and I've got these responsibilities, maybe I can save $1,000 into a Roth account. And if I could match that $1,000 that he puts in and give a gift of 1,000, I was just looking at the math of how that works. If that averaged 7% for the next 44 years until he was age 60, that $1,000 turns into $20,000.
That's so
So,
cool.
so just the power of compounding, not only does it encourage him to say, okay, let's help you get started. He's got skin in the game. He's putting money in, but now I'm helping him along the way with the small gift, something that maybe is within my means to do. But the effect over his next 44 years or maybe longer till he's looking at retirement would be huge. And so I think that's a very practical way to kind of incentivize, a grandchild or even a parent, if you're listening to the podcast and your children are still maybe teenagers, to help them get going as they maybe get that first summer job, or maybe even they're younger and they've got a lawn mowing business. As soon as they have earned income, then this custodial Roth IRA becomes an option. And so if they're a W-2 employee, if they're getting a 1099, just maybe doing a little part-time work, or like I said, if they've got a lawn business, if they're babysitting and people are paying them, then they can get started with this custodial Roth.
The power of the Roth is that you get the money in those accounts. It's going to grow tax-free, and then qualified distributions from that account are going to be tax-free. Now, this is probably something you don't want to tell the kids and the grandkids
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're helping to fund it. But the thing you don't want to tell them is that any regular contributions can be withdrawn at any time, at any age, tax and penalty free. The contributions can be. So
Yep.
let's say while they were working, they were 15, 16, they started working, you were helping them max out their Roth IRA every year. You put $30,000 into this account. It grew to $50,000. The Roth ordering rules allow them to take that $30,000 out. So it's money that they could access. Now, we don't want them to think of it that way, because we want them to let that money just sit there and compound and grow and continue adding to it until they're 58, 59, 60 years old and ready to retire. And they've got this big pot of tax-free money available to them. But it is somewhat of an emergency fund for them if they had to. They're out on their own and they need some money to be able to access it. A way they could technically access it without tax or penalty.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
contributions.
There's an annual limit to the Roth, and because you do have that opportunity to pull that money out, let's say if you were like, okay, gonna buy your first house or something like that, that money would be available in terms of the contributions to pull out if need be. And so that there is, to talk about flexibility, we don't just want to think about it as this money's locked up till 59 and a half. Best case scenario is it stays there until you're 59 and a half. But in a pinch, that's certainly something that those funds could be utilized. So
There's a website that I'll include in the show notes, investor.gov, and they have a compound interest calculator. And I was invited to my kids' school to go in and speak to their financial algebra class. And I shared this calculator with them. And kids that have never seen or understood the power of compounding. And I mean, my son was so excited. He was showing all of his friends, look at how much money we're going to have in the future if we just start early. It's the key to compounding is time, and you can never make that up. And that's why we're always encouraging people. We got to start this earlier. If you start helping kids early, just the amount of time that money can compound and grow for them. One of the reasons Warren Buffett's as wealthy as he is, he's just lived a long time. The money's just been able to continue to compound and grow for him. So, but I'll include that link in the show notes so that parents can share that with if they have teenage grandkids, that really the idea of compounding, Albert Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. And to go back to the mantra that we started with, we don't want to just give them the money. We want to give them the wisdom that's going to allow them to see that money continue to grow, the wisdom that you had that allowed you to be able to give that gift to them. And that's something we want to transfer along with the financial gift. That's so huge.
So huge. All right. You ready to transfer to the next account that we want to talk about?
Yeah, so we've talked about education and kind of what's the optimal tool there. We talked about an UTMA and an UGMA account, and we talked about one of the provisions is you've got that age of limitations. Eventually, that account's their account. There's no more custodial control over that. When we talk about a custodial Roth, same thing. That age of limitation applies. They're going to become the individual owner of that account at some point. So then the question becomes, okay, what if maybe, especially for those with a larger estate that are thinking, okay, I'm going to gift a large chunk of money, but I don't want to just, when they reach 18 or 21, have them just blow this money. So what can I do so that there's maybe some more controls that this money is going to be spent in a way that won't allow them to just blow it. And that's where we're talking about some more complex instruments, and some trust instruments would be the ideal there, where we can do things like put in language that there's going to be staggered distributions. At 25, maybe they can withdraw 25% of the principal instead of it becoming completely theirs 100%. Now we can put language in that says, okay, maybe at 25, at these milestones, at college graduation, some portion of the money unlocks, and we can, instead of just giving them, a large sum of money that maybe they're not prepared to handle, now we can kind of put those provisions in there that's going to allow them to be set up. And so that's where a trust instrument's going to come in. I think it's important thinking about this transferring to minors. Is if you're using maybe this annual gifting limit and saying, okay, I want to fund this, but I'm going to be doing this every year, or maybe you're exceeding that because you're trying to lower your estate and saying, I want to make these transfers. Well, then this is where that more formal legal entity is going to be important with the trust, and maybe setting up some protections as well for the future of like potential creditors, or people are thinking, well, what if my grandchild gets married? I don't want their spouse, if they divorce them, to maybe be able to take all of these assets. So this is where this type of structure is going to be important. And we are not state attorneys. We help clients plan for some of these needs and then work together with the state attorneys for titling and investment options, and just thinking how of your overall financial plan, how these things would flow at different deaths or different events. So, but that's kind of an important aspect that we would want to be thinking about, having some spendthrift provisions. In the future, I might, I've thought about, maybe we do a podcast, or just thinking about what if, you've got a child that's a prodigal. If you're familiar with the story in the Bible of the prodigal son who wasted his inheritance as soon as he got it, he went out and blew it. And just thinking about, maybe you're a grandparent or parent that's thinking about, okay, I want to include my grandchild, but I'm really not sure that they can be trusted with this money. Here's where this type of provision is, or this type of instrument is going to be important. How to set them up so that they're not that bad case scenario of an 18-year-old that just got a bunch of money who doesn't know how to manage it very well. And what was supposed to maybe be a blessing to them really has not been a blessing. It's really been more of a detriment. That's what we don't want to see happen. So that's where this can be important.
Too often, people think money equals happiness or contentment. And that is not the case. I mean, you don't have to look very far in this world that we live in today and see people who have a lot of money, especially if you look at like Hollywood. And, so many of these young people, they're just messed up and they're not happy. There's a lot of money around them, but they're not content. From a personal standpoint, walking life with a lot of people, I've definitely seen situations where an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old all of a sudden has access to a big chunk of money, and the grandparents are like, gosh, we got to get him in to talk to Jason, and we'll have the conversations, and I'll try to get them to think logically about how to put some guardrails. But I can't think of a situation, Tim, personally, where when a young person receives a big chunk of money, that it's not all gone in a very short number of years. They just haven't developed the tools to know how to manage that kind of wealth. I think there's actually research that shows that people that win the lottery, a lot of times, same thing happens to them. There's this wealth effect where they come into a lot of money, they've never had that much, and they just blow it all within a short number of years. And that is where some of these trusts really can come into play to protect people from themselves until they have a little bit of life under them, a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of understanding of stewardship. And then in some cases, you've got people who have substance issues, or they're just not, their gift was not one that is to be able to steward money well. I mean, there's just some people out there that are just not good with money. And so to be able to build some guardrails around them, some protections around them to protect them from themselves, it can be the right way to go for many people.
Yeah, some have just not built that money management muscle that they need to be able to be wise with it. And so that's where this is important. I had a good friend of mine when I was in high school. His mom had passed away, and he had gotten some life insurance money that became available when he turned 18. So we were seniors in high school. He turned 18 and received a couple $100,000 overnight. First thing he did, he went out and bought a new car, and then
Was it a
he was tired.
Camaro?
It was not a Camaro,
Oh, because
but
my friend bought the Camaro.
yeah, yeah. But then what happened is 3 months later, he didn't like that car, so he traded in and bought another new car.
Oh,
And then, within a matter of months, he had gotten in trouble at home, and because he had money, he up and left and went and lived with extended family, and it wasn't good for him. And that's what we're looking to do. We're not trying to be mean. I know a lot of folks are listening. They love their grandchildren, they love their children, and they want to be a blessing to them. But what we want to avoid is, how do we what we intended to be a blessing not become something that's a detriment to them?
absolutely.
And that's where this is coming into play.
That prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son, boy, it's timeless, and it just
Yeah.
plays out over and over and over again. And
Yeah.
yeah, and the thing that, wow, that's good.
Yeah. And for wise stewardship, there's things that we can help, and we help clients put into place when they think about, I don't want to hand them $1 million when we pass away, or million, multi-millions of dollars, because they won't be wise with it. And so that's where we can help. Okay, let's have a plan that allows them to be blessed, but not to a point where they're just not able to make good decisions with that.
Another area that we want to talk about just briefly is the idea of paying medical bills directly to the hospital. And so you have a young grandchild, they are, maybe your first great grandchild is on the way. And so they're not established in life. It's hard when you're 22, 23, 25 years old and that first grandbaby's coming along, or that first baby's coming along. And even if people have health insurance, there can still be a lot of expense associated. So we talked about the ability to pay tuition directly to the college as one way to get money out of your estate, reduce your estate. But there's also this opportunity for medical bills. Do you want to take a minute and just summarize that or talk about that?
Yeah, well, that's just a key provision when we think about how to maximize and utilize that annual gifting limit. Here's a way where, if there's a need and you feel led to meet that need, you can give beyond that annual exclusion amount, and pay directly to the care provider to take care of maybe that surgery that had to be done, or that emergency visit. Lots of different cases where maybe you've got someone that, in your family, or someone else that is face these medical needs. You can step in and help with that. From a transfer, from a gift standpoint, that's where you're able to do so beyond that just annual gifting limit. And it really unlocks the ability to give a bigger sum without having to file any paperwork, that type of thing. So education is that way. You've got to give directly to, kind of bypass the individual, give directly to the university. That's the key provision here. In this case, paying directly to the hospital or the doctor to cover those needs. It allows you to do that and maybe be a blessing in a way, that is efficient, and using the tax code to your advantage.
And one of the things, we've been talking about blessing the next generation. And also in some of these scenarios, there are tax benefits that come along for the ride. We always tell people taxes are like the cherry on top, but it's not the primary motivator. Like, we never let the tax tail wag the dog. I see people get themselves into all kinds of trouble because they make everything about taxes. And taxes should be something that complements a good plan, complements a good investment strategy, but it's not our primary motivator. I think it's when you really try to reduce taxes and that becomes the most important thing to you, it can just cause you to go down some paths that get people into tools or planning strategies that optimize for taxes, but they leave out the planning and the investments and everything else that goes into this. So we don't want people to make decisions solely based on taxes. It should just be something that comes along that's a benefit to them.
Yeah, exactly. You want to have a good plan that does incorporate taxes, but first starts with the goals that you have in mind. And then it's, how can we accomplish that from a tax efficient way? The goal is not to just reduce taxes. The goal is to help you accomplish your goals. How can we do that in the best tax efficient way to get you to where you want to go?
Well, Tim, this has been a lot of fun. We talked a lot. I mean, this has been a long podcast and there's a lot of great information in here. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we finish up today?
Yeah, I just hope that, there's a lot of vehicles out there that we've touched on some. I hope that this will give some folks just ideas of, not only practically speaking how they can transfer, but then how can they be training up their grandchildren or other folks that are in their lives to be wise investors, to be wise stewards of the resources, and just using what, if they're listening to the podcast, they're trying to gain wisdom. So we'd encourage them, okay, take the message and train somebody else with it. And hopefully we've given some good tools that will be effective at doing that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you for tuning in to Sound Retirement Radio. For articles, links, and resources from today's show, visit soundretirementplanning.com. If you enjoy the podcast, share it with a friend and give us a 5-star review. Ready to kickstart your retirement planning? Head over to retirementbudgetcalculator.com. Need assistance with investment management? Explore our services at parker-financial.net. Information and opinions expressed here are believed to be accurate and complete, for general information only, and should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or financial advice for any individual, and does not constitute a solicitation for any securities or insurance products. Please consult with your financial professional before taking action on anything discussed in this program. Parker Financial, its representatives, or its affiliates have no liability for investment decisions or other actions taken or made by you based on the information provided in this program. All insurance-related discussions are subject to the claims-paying ability of the company. Investing involves risk. Jason Parker is the president of Parker Financial, LLC, an independent fee-based wealth management firm located at 9230 Bayshore Drive Northwest, Suite 201, Silverdale, Washington. For additional information, call 360-337-2701 or visit us online at soundretirementplanning.com.